And we are live, coming from Denver, Colorado. Okay, let's see. All right. Let's get started. First things first. Pull up the chat here. Ooh. I am live, right? Yeah, I'm live. Okay, we're good. Okay, why do I... Wait, where's my... Normally it shows up. There it is. Oop. Moderation is good, YouTube. That is true, but I don't need it because nobody's watching, so, like, whatever. I don't need moderation. Not yet, at least. Isn't that correct? Okay, we'll just close that because we don't want it. All right. Okay. Now we got all this background. Oh, wait. You know what I didn't do? Just don my jewelry. My bling. What are we wearing today? What are we wearing today? I'm missing a ring here. Right? There it is. There it is. There it is. I like to go a little extra hard for the read aloud streams because, you know, we're out here having a good time. You know, you gotta reflect that with your hi. I'm blinging out. Hi. How's it going, Brabderish? Hi. I'm putting on jewelry. And then I'm going to go turn off my air conditioner because it's loud in the background. So, one sec. Boom. Nice and peaceful. Nice and peaceful. Oh, wait. We gotta get the reading or the lighting just perfect. Just perfect. For the read aloud live stream. Okay. All right. Well, y'all ready? Yeah, it might not be too bad. Honestly, it probably isn't too bad, but I want a good recording. Because I edit. I want to edit and upload the stuff. So I want it to be as clean as possible. Even though I sound like an idiot half the time. I was editing chapter 3 and man, it is hard for me to keep a whole read going straight without having an awkward edit in there. Okay. We're going to get started here. Is there anything else I'm missing? Let's see. I don't want to open my window yet. I think we're good. Hydration. Okay. Let's see. I got to make sure I'm comfortable too, because if you aren't comfortable and then you sit here and read for 2 hours. Yeah. Yes. If you sit here and read for 2 hours and you aren't comfortable, it's miserable. So I got to make sure I feel good. You know. Like, okay. I think I'm good. I think so. Yeah. Get as close to the book as you can. So I can, like, lean back a little bit. And get this positioned well. And you're responding to me, so I can only assume the audio is working. Okay. All right, we're going to get started. I hope you are all ready for the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, Chapter 7. Chapter 7. In the House of Tom Bombadil. I'm excited for this one. Tom Bombadil does not appear in the movies. But I watched a TikTok of some weird dude talking about him, and he seemed interesting. So, this is a whole new experience for me. And I do not prepare ahead of time. Except for maybe voices, but not really. So we're just gonna go for it. All right, let us begin. Here, wait, let's get a little closer here. This feels better, I think. The four hobbits stepped over the wide stone threshold and stood still, blinking. They were in a long, low room filled with the light of swamp. Oh, fuck! I already messed up. Okay. Filled with the light of lamps swinging from the beams of the roof. And on the table of dark polished wood stood many candles, tall and yellow, burning brightly. In a chair at the far side of the room, facing the outer door, sat a woman. Her long yellow hair rippled down her shoulders. Her gown was green as young reeds, shot with silver like beads of dew. And her belt was of gold, shaped like a chain of flag lilies, set with the pale blue eyes of forget-me-nots. About her feet, in wide vessels of green and brown earthenware, white water lilies were floating, so that she seemed to be enthralled. Man, so I'm like, normally I'll go back one or two words when I mess up, and just like try to keep going quickly. But I was editing chapter 3, and it was like a nightmare because my rereads were like so awkward. So I have to make my life easier with editing to like do clear, full like sections. We're talking about a pretty lady, I think, who's very water-esque. Okay, where were we? About her feet in wide vessels of green and brown earthenware. White water lilies were floating, so that she seemed to be enthroned in the midst of a pool. "Enter, good guests," she said, and as she spoke, they knew that it was her clear voice that they had heard singing. They came a few timid steps further into the room, and began to bow low, feeling strangely surprised and awkward, like folk that knocking at a cottage door. Some of these sentences, like folk that knocking at a cottage door to beg for a drink of water, have been answered by a fair young elf queen clad in living flowers. But before they could say anything, she sprang up lightly and over the lily bowls and ran laughing towards them. And as she ran, her gown rustled softly like the wind in the flowering borders of a river. "Come, dear folk," she said. She's going to sound a lot like Frodo, too. "Come, dear folk," she said, taking Frodo by the hand. "Laugh and be merry. I'm Goldberry, daughter of the river." Then lightly she passed them, and closing the door, she turned her back to it, with her white arms spread across it. "Let us shut out the night," she said, "for you are still afraid, perhaps, of mist and tree shadows and deep water and untamed things. Fear nothing, for tonight you are under the roof of Tom Bombadil." Damn, Tom Bombadil's so amazing. So amazing. The hobbits looked at her in wonder, and she looked at each of them and smiled. "Fair Lady Goldberry," said Frodo at last, feeling his heart moved with a joy he did not understand. He stood as he had at times stood enchanted by fair elven voices, but the spell that was now laid upon him was different. Less keen and lofty was the delight, but deeper and nearer to the mortal heart. Marvelous, and yet not strange. "Fair Lady Goldberry," he said again, Now the joy that was hidden in the... Sorry. Voice change. Now the joy that was hidden in the songs we heard is made plain to me. O slender as a willow wand, O clearer than clear water, O reed by the living pool, fair river daughter, O springtime and summertime, and spring again after, O wind on the waterfall, and the leaves' laughter. Suddenly he stopped and stammered, overcome with surprise to hear himself saying such things. But Goldberry laughed,
"Welcome," she said. "I had not heard that folk of the Shire were so sweet-tongued, but I see that you are an elf friend. The light in your eyes and the ring in your voice tells it. This is a merry meeting. Sit now and wait for the master of the house. He will not be long. He is tending your tired beasts."
Okay, with this girl's voice, I don't know if you guys you probably have seen Wicked. The one they introduce the wizard, and there's the lady who's like, "You are now speaking to the wizard," and it's like that's the vibe I'm getting right now with this girl. Okay, the hobbits sat down gladly in low rushed seated chairs, while Goldberry busied herself about the table, and their eyes followed her, for the slender grace of her movement filled them with quiet delight. From somewhere behind the house came the sound of singing. Every now and again they caught among many a derry dole and merry dole and ring-a-ding-dillo the repeated words. "Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his blues and his boots are yellow." Yes, Wicked. I actually haven't seen the second one yet. I gotta get on that.
"Fair lady," said Frodo again after a while, "tell me, if my asking does not seem foolish, who is Tom Bombadil?" "He is," said Goldberry, staying her swift movements and smiling. Frodo looked at her questioningly. "He is, as you have seen him," she said in answer to his strange look. He said in answer to his look, "He is the master of the wood, water, and hill." "Then all this strange land belongs to him?" "No, indeed," she answered, and her smile faded. "That would indeed be a burden," she added in a low voice, as if to herself. "The trees and the grasses and all things growing or living in the land belong each to themselves. Tom Bombadil is the master. No one has ever caught old Tom walking in the forest, wading in the water, leaping on the hilltops under light and shadow. He has no fear. Tom Bombadil is master."
Ooh, page turn. The door opened, and in came Tom Bombadil. He had now no hat, and his thick brown hair was crowned with autumn leaves. He laughed, and going to Goldberry, took her hand. "Here's my pretty..." I decided to give him a crazy voice for some reason, because he has a blue jacket and yellow boots. I mean, come on. Guy's a goofball, right? "Here's my pretty lady," he said, bowing to the hobbits. "Here's my Goldberry, clothed in all silver green, with flowers in her girdle. Is the table laden? I see yellow cream, and honeycomb, and white bread, and butter, milk, cheese, and green herbs, and ripe berries gathered. Is that enough for us? Is supper ready?" "It is," said Goldberry, "but the guests perhaps are not." Tom clapped his hands and cried, "Tom, Tom, your guests are tired, and you had near forgotten. Come now, my merry friends, and Tom will refresh you. You shall clean grimy hands, and wash your weary faces, cast off your muddy cloaks, and comb out your tangles." Yellow and blue is a choice. Yeah. Yeah, completely a choice. This guy's a goofy one. A good goofy one. If the TikTok that talked about him is correct, then he's a good guy. Even though I was likening him to the wizard, which is not maybe a good guy. Or just very Swedish. I don't know if I can do a Swedish accent, but that is a good... Oh, IKEA. Oh, okay, I get it. Funny. Okay, where am I at? Comb out your tangles. Ah. He opened the door, and they followed him down a short passage and round a sharp turn.
They came to a low room with a sloping roof. A penthouse, it seemed, built onto the north end of the house. Its walls were of clean stone, and they were mostly covered with green hanging mats and yellow curtains. The floor was flagged and strewn with fresh green rushes. There were 4 deep mattresses, each piled with white blankets, laid on the floor along one side. Against the opposite wall was a long bench. See, sometimes I have trouble staying focused. That's my problem. Too much ADHD. Okay. Where were we at? Something about a bench and not a beach. Deep mattresses. Against the opposite wall was a long bench laden with wide earthenware basins, and beside it stood brown ewers filled with water, some cold, some steaming hot. There were soft green slippers set ready beside each bed. Before long, washed and refreshed, the hobbits were seated at the table, 2 on each side, while at either end sat Goldberry and the master. It was a long and merry meal. Though the hobbits ate, as only famished hobbits can eat, there was no lack. The drink in their drinking bowls seemed to be clear cold water, and yet it went to their hearts like wine and set their voices free. And set free their voices. The guests became suddenly aware that they were singing merrily, as if it was easier and more natural than talking. At last, Tom and Goldberry rose and cleared the table swiftly. The guests were commanded to sit quiet and were set in chairs, each with a footstool to his tired feet. There was a fire in the wide hearth before them, and was burning with a sweet smell, as if it were built of apple wood. When everything was set in order, all the lights in the room were put out, except one lamp and a pair of candles at each end of the chimney shelf. Then Goldberry came and stood before them, holding a candle, and she wished them each a good night and deep sleep. "Have peace now," she said, "until the morning. Heed no nightly noises, for nothing passes door and window here, save moonlight and starlight, and the wind of the hilltop. Good night." She passed out of the room with a glimmer and a rustle. The sound of her footsteps was like a stream fading gently away downhill over cool stones in the quiet of night. Tom sat on a while beside them in silence, while each of them tried to muster the courage to ask one of the many questions he had meant to ask during supper. While each of them tried to muster the courage to ask one of the many questions he had meant to Sometimes these sentences get me, dude. While each of them tried to muster the courage to ask one of the many questions he had meant to speak at dinner. He had meant to ask at supper. Why can't I get that right? Many questions he had meant to ask at supper. I'm really fumbling today. Sleep gathered on their eyelids. At last Frodo spoke. "Do you hear me calling, Master? Or was it just chance that brought you at that moment?" God, dude, I need some drugs. I'm just kidding. I don't need drugs. Tom stirred like a man shaken out of a pleasant dream. "Eh? What?" said he. "Did I hear you calling? Nay, I did not hear. I was busy singing. Just chance brought me then, if chance ye call it. It was no plan of mine, though I was waiting for you. We heard news of you, and learned that you were wandering. We guessed you'd come here long down to the water. All paths lead that way, down to Withywindle. Old grey willow man, he's a mighty singer, and it's hard for little folk to escape his cunning mazes. But Tom had an errand there, and he dared not hinder. Tom nodded, as if sleep was taking him again, but he went on in a soft singing voice. Great, so I have to do this voice soft somehow? I had an errand there, gathering water lilies, green leaves and lilies white, to please my pretty lady. The last ere the year's end, to keep them from the winter, to flower by her pretty feet, till the snows are melted. Each year at summer's end, I go to find them for her, in a wide deep pool, deep and clear, far down the withy windle. There they open first in spring, and there they linger latest. By that pool long ago I found the river daughter, the fair young Goldberry, sitting in the rushes. Sweet was her singing then, and her heart was beating. He opened his eyes and looked at them with a sudden glint of blue. And that proved well for you, for now I shall no longer go down deep again against the forest water, and not while the year is old, nor shall I be passing Old Man Willow's house this side of springtime, not till the merry spring, when the river daughter dances down the withy path to bathe in the water. He fell silent again, but Frodo could not help asking one more question, the one he most desired to have answered. Tell us, Frodo. Tell us, master, he said, about the Willow Man. Where is he? I have never heard of him before. No, don't. How do they sound? Vaguely Irish? I'm Irish. No, don't. No, don't, said Merry and Pippin together, sitting suddenly upright. Not now, not until the morning. That is right, said the old man. Now isn't the time for resting. Some things are ill to hear when the world's in shadow. Sleep till the morning light, rest on the pillow, heed no nightly noise, fear no grey willow. And with that, he took down the lamp and blew it out, and grasping a candle in either hand, he led them out of the room. Their mattresses and pillows were soft as down, and the blankets were of white wool. They had hardly laid themselves on the deep beds and drawn the light covers over them before they were asleep. In the dead of night, Frodo lay in a dream without light. Then he saw the young moon rising. Under its thin light there loomed before him a black wall of rock, pierced by a dark arch like a great gate. It seemed to Frodo that he was lifted up, and passing over he saw the rock wall was a circle of hills, and that within it was a plain, and in the midst of the plain stood a pinnacle of stone, like a vast tower, but not made by hands. On its top stood the figure of a man. The moon, as it rose, seemed to hang for a moment above his head, and glistened in his white hair as the wind stirred it. Up from the dark plain below came the crying of fell voices, and the howling of many wolves. Suddenly, a shadow, like the shape of great wings, passed across the moon. The figure lifted his arms, and a light flashed from the staff that he wielded. A mighty eagle swept down and bore him away. Is this Gandalf being rescued by the eagle? Wait. Figure of a man, yes. I'm like, sometimes I'm so focused on reading, I'm not paying a full attention to what I'm actually reading. I'll keep reading, okay. The voices wailed, and the wolves yammered. There was a noise like a strong wind blowing, and on it was borne the sound of hoofs, galloping, galloping, galloping from the east. Black riders, thought Frodo as he wakened. When with the sound of the hooves still echoing in his mind. He wondered if he would ever again have the courage to leave the safety of these stone walls. He lay motionless, still listening, but all was now silent. And at last he turned and fell asleep again, or wandered into some other unremembered dream. At his side, Pippin lay dreaming pleasantly, but a change came over his dreams, and he turned and groaned. Suddenly he woke, or thought he had waked, and yet still in the darkness, the sound that disturbed his dream, tip-tap, squeak. The noise was like the branches fretting in the wind, twig fingers scraping wall and window. Creak, creak, creak. He wondered if there were willow trees close to the house. And then suddenly he had a dreadful feeling that he was not in an ordinary house at all, but inside the willow, and listening to that horrible dry creaking voice laughing at him again. He sat up, felt the soft pillow yield to his hands, and he laid down again relieved. He seemed to hear the echo of words in his ears. "Fear nothing, have peace until the morning, heed no nightly noises." Then he went to sleep again. It was the sound of water that Mary heard falling into his quiet sleep, water streaming down gently and then spreading irresistibly all around the house into a dark shoreless pool. It gurgled under the walls and was rising slowly but surely. Sorry, who? This is Mary? Mary. "I shall be drowned," he thought. "It will find its way in, and then I shall drown." He felt that he was lying in a soft, slimy bog, and springing up, he set his foot on the corner of the cold, hard flagstone. Then he remembered where he was and lay down again. He seemed to hear, or remember hearing, "Nothing passes the doors." Wait, no. This is old Tom again. "Nothing passes the doors or windows, save moonlight and starlight, and the wind of the hilltop." A little breath of sweet air moved the curtain. He breathed deep and fell asleep again. As far as he could remember, Sam slept with the night in deep content, if logs are contented. He's a log. They just called him a log. Experienced something similar when I'm often reading it loud. It's very difficult to close the volume. Yeah, I know. It's like I gotta say this right, and it takes way too much of my energy to do it. So it's like I'm half paying attention to what I'm actually saying, because it's like I need to get it right. All right. Where are we at? I got a sparkling drink. I don't think the mic can hear it. Probably. I doubt it, but it's there. And I'm like, is it sound bad? All right. Where are we at? Okay. They woke up, all four at once, in the morning light. Tom was moving about the room, whistling like a starling. When he heard them start, he clapped his hands and cried, "Hey, come, merry doll, derry doll, my hearties!" He drew back the yellow curtains, and the hobbits saw that these had covered the windows at either end of the room, one looking east and the other looking west. They leapt up, refreshed. Frodo ran to the eastern window and found himself looking into a kitchen garden gray with dew. He had expected to see the turf right up to the walls, turf all pocked with hoof prints. Actually, his view was screened by a tall line of beans on poles. But above and far beyond them, the gray top of the hill loomed up against the sunrise. It was a pale morning. In the east, behind long clouds like lines of soiled wool, strained red at the edges, lay glimmering deeps of yellow. The sky spoke of rain to come. The light was broadening quickly, and the red flowers on the beans began to glow against the wet green leaves. Pippin looked out of the window.
Can't hear. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for. I appreciate your assistance. Thank you very much. Pippin. Let's see where we at. Okay. Pippin looked out the western window, down into a pool of mist. The forest was hidden under a fog. It was like looking down onto a sloping cloud roof from above. There was a fold or channel where the mist was broken into many plumes and billows. The valley of the Withywindle. The stream ran down the hill on the left and vanished into the white shadows. Near at hand was a flower garden and a clipped hedge silver-netted, and beyond that gray-shaven glass pale with dewdrops. There was no willow tree to be seen. "Good morning, merry friends," cried Tom, opening the eastern window wide. A cool air flowed in. It had a rainy smell. "Sun won't show her face much today, I'm thinking. I have begun walking wide, leaping on the hilltops, since the grey dawn began, nosing wind and weather, wet grass underfoot, wet sky above me. I awaken Goldberry singing under window, but not wakes hobbit folk in the early morning. In the night, little folk wake up in the darkness and sleep after light has come. Ring-a-ding-dillo. Wake now, my merry friends, and forget the nightly noises. Ring-a-ding-dillo-dell, derry-dell, my hearties." That line right there is also why I gave him a goofy voice. Who says that? Ring-a-ding-dillo-dell, derry-dell, my hearties. Like, what is he? Like a pirate on a kids' TV show? Sorry. Okay. "If you come soon, you'll find breakfast on the table. If you come late, you'll get grass and rainwater." Needless to say, not that Tom's threat sounded very serious, the hobbits came soon, and left the table late only when it was beginning to look rather empty. Neither Tom nor Goldberry were there. Tom could be heard about the house, clattering in the kitchen and up and down the stairs, and singing here and there outside. The room looked westward over the mist-clouded valley, and the window was open. Water dripped down from the thatched eaves above. Before they had finished breakfast, the clouds had joined into an unbroken roof, and a straight gray rain came softly and steadily down. Behind its deep curtain, the forest was completely veiled. As they looked out of the window, that was too harsh. As they looked out of the window, there came, falling gently, as if it was flowing down the rain out of the sky, the clear voice of Goldberry singing up above them. They could hear her words, but it seemed plain to them that the song was a rain song, as sweet as showers on dry hills, that told the tale of a river from the spring in the highlands to the sea far below. The hobbits listened with delight, and Frodo was glad in his heart, and blessed the kindly weather, because it delayed them from departing. The thought of going had been heavy upon him from the moment he awoke, but he guessed now that they would not go further that day. The upper wind settled in the west. Deeper and wetter clouds rolled up to spill their laden rain on the bare heads of the downs. Nothing could be seen all around the house but falling water. Frodo stood near the open door and watched the white chalky path turn into a little river of milk and go bubbling away down into the valley. Tom Bombadil came trotting around the corner of the house, waving his arms as if he was warding off the rain, and indeed, when he sprang over the threshold, he seemed quite dry, except for his boots. These he took off and put in the chimney corner. Then he sat in the largest chair and called the hobbits to gather around him. Mouth noise. Sorry. Okay. "This is Goldberry's washing day," he said, "and her autumn cleaning. Too wet for hobbit folk. Let them rest while they are able. It's a good day for long tales, for questions and for answers, so Tom will start the talking." He then told them many remarkable stories, sometimes half
sometimes half as if speaking to himself, sometimes looking at them suddenly with a bright blue eye under his deep brows. Often his voice would turn to song, and he would get out of his chair and dance about. He told them tales of bees and flowers, and the ways of trees, and the strange creatures of the forest, about evil things and good things, things friendly and things unfriendly, cruel things and kind things, and secrets hidden under brambles. As they listened, they began to understand the lives of the forest. Apart from themselves, indeed to feel themselves as the strangers where all other things were at home. Moving constantly in and out of his talk was Old Man Willow, and Frodo learned now enough to content him, indeed more than enough, for it was not comfortable lore. Tom's words laid bare the hearts of trees and their thoughts, which were often dark and strange, and filled with a hatred of things that go free upon the earth, gnawing, biting, breaking, hacking, burning, destroyers and usurpers. It was not called the Old Forest without reason, for it was indeed ancient, a survivor of vast forgotten worlds, and in there lived yet, aging no quicker than the hills, the fathers of trees, remembering times when they were the lords. The countless years had filled them with pride and rooted wisdom, and with malice. But none were more dangerous than the great Willow. His heart was rotten, but his strength was green, and he was cunning, and a master of winds, and his song and thought ran through the woods on both sides of the river. His gray, thirsty spirit drew power out of the earth, and spread like fine root threads in the ground, and invisible twig fingers in the air, till it had under its dominion nearly all the trees of the forest, from the hedge to the downs. Now we know why the forest is so dang spooky. Because of the Old Man Willow. And it almost swallowed them up. Terrifying. Sorry. Suddenly, Tom's talk left the woods and went leaping up the young stream, over bubbling waterfalls, over pebbles and worn rocks, and among small flowers and close grass and wet crannies, wandering at the last up onto the downs. They heard of the great barrows, and the green mounds, and the stone rings upon the hills, and in the hollows among the hills. Sheep were bleating in flocks. Green walls and white walls rose. There were fortresses on the heights. Kings of the little kingdoms fought together, and the young sun shone like fire on the red metal of their new and greedy swords. There was victory and defeat, and towers fell. Fortresses were burned, and flames went up into the sky. Gold was piled on the biers of the dead kings and queens, and mounds covered them, and the stone doors were shut, and the grass grew all over. Sheep walked for a while, biting the grass, but soon the hills were empty again. A shadow came out of the dark places far away, and the bones were stirred in the mounds. Barrow-wights walked in the hollow places with a clink of rings on cold fingers and gold chains in the wind. Stone rings grinned out of the ground like broken teeth in the moonlight. The hobbits shuddered. Even in the Shire, the rumor of the Barrow-wights of the Barrow Downs beyond the forest had been heard. But it was not a tale that any hobbit liked to listen to. Even by a comfortable fireside far away, these four now suddenly remembered what the joy of this house had driven from their minds. The house of Tom Bombadil, nestled under the very shoulder of those dreaded hills. They lost the thread of his tale and shifted uneasily, looking aside at one another. When they caught his words again, they found that he had now wandered into the strange regions beyond their memory,
and beyond their waking thought, into times when the world was wider, and the seas flowed straight to the western shore, and still on and back Tom went singing out into ancient starlight, when only the elf sires were awake. Then suddenly he stopped, and they saw that he nodded as if he was falling asleep. The hobbits sat still before him, enchanted, and it seemed as if, under the spell of his words, the wind had gone, and the clouds had dried up, and the day had been withdrawn, and the darkness had come from the east and west, and all the sky was filled with the light of white stars. Not gonna lie, he sounds a lot more peaceful than the voice I gave him would imply. But here we are. You know what I mean? Here we are. No going back now. Whether the morning and evening of one day or of many days had passed, Frodo could not tell. He did not feel either hungry or tired, only filled with wonder. The stars shone through the window, and the silence of the heavens seemed to be around him. He spoke at last out of his wonder and a sudden fear of that silence. "Who are you, master?" he asked. What? What? Said Tom, sitting up, and his eyes glinting in the gloom. "Don't you know my name yet? But that's the only answer. Tell me, who are you alone, yourself and nameless? But you are young, and I'm old. Eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, my friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw their little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the Barrow-wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already. Before the seas were bent, he knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside." A shadow seemed to pass by the window, and the hobbits glanced hastily through the panes. When they turned again, Goldberry stood in the door behind, framed in light. She held a candle, shielding its flame from the draught with her hand, and the light flowed through it like sunlight through a white shell. "The rain has ended," she said, "and now the waters are running down the hills under the stars. Let us now laugh and be glad." "And let us have food and drink," cried Tom. "Long tales are thirsty, and long listening's hungry work, morning, noon, and evening." With that, he jumped out of his chair, and with a bound took a candle from the chimney shelf and lit it in the flame that Goldberry held, and then he danced about the table. Suddenly he hopped through the door and disappeared. Quickly he returned, bearing a large and laden tray. Then Tom and Goldberry sat at the table, and the hobbits sat half in wonder and half in laughter. So fair was the grace of Goldberry, and so merry and odd the caperings of Tom. Yet in some fashion they seemed to weave a single dance, neither hindering the other, in and out of the room. And round about the table, with wide great speed, food and vessels and lights were set in order. The boards blazed with candles, white and yellow. Tom bowed to his guests. "Supper is ready," said Goldberry, and now the hobbits saw that she was clothed in all silver and a white girdle, and her shoes were like fish's mail. But Tom was all in clean blue as rain-washed forget-me-nots, and he had green stockings. Now he's got green stockings? Come on, this guy's a goofball. Okay. It was a supper even better than before. The hobbits, under the spell of Tom's words, may have missed one meal or many, but when the food was before them, it seemed at least a week since they had eaten. They did not sing or even speak much for a while, and paid close attention to business. After a time, their hearts and spirits rose high again.
and their voices rang out in mirth and laughter. After they had eaten, Goldberry sang many songs for them, songs that began merrily in the hills and fell softly down into silence. And in the silences they saw in their minds pools and waters wider than they had known. And looking into them, they saw the sky below them and the stars like jewels in the depths. Then once more she wished each of them a good night and left them by the fireside. But Tom now seemed wide awake and plied them with questions. He appeared already to know much about them and all their families, and indeed to know much of all the history and doings of the Shire, down from days hardly remembered among the hobbits themselves. It no longer surprised them, but he made no secret that he owned it. It no longer surprised them, but he made no secret that he owed his recent knowledge largely to Farmer Maggot, whom he seemed to regard as a person of more importance than they had imagined. "There's earth under his old feet and clay on his fingers, wisdom in his bones, and both his eyes are open," said Tom. It was also clear that Tom had dealings with the elves, and it seemed that in some fashion news had reached him from Gildor concerning the flight of Frodo. Indeed, so much did Tom know, and so cunning was his questioning, that Frodo found himself telling him more about Bilbo and his own hopes and fears than he had told before even to Gandalf. Tom wagged his head up and down, and there was a glint in his eyes when he heard of the riders. The riders. The riders! "Show me the precious ring," he said suddenly in the midst of the story, and Frodo, to his own astonishment, drew out the chain from his pocket and, unfastening the ring, handed it over at once to Tom. That is astonishing. That is very astonishing. It seemed to grow larger as it lay for a moment in his big brown skin hand. Then suddenly he put it to his eye and laughed. For a second the hobbits had a vision, both comical and alarming, of his bright blue eye gleaming through a circle of gold. Then Tom put the ring round the end of his finger. Then Tom put the ring round the end of his little finger and held it up to the candlelight. For a moment the hobbits noticed nothing strange about this. Then they gasped. There was no sign of Tom disappearing. Tom laughed again. Then he spun the ring. Tom laughed again, and then he spun the ring in the air, and it vanished with a flash. Frodo gave a cry, and Tom leaned forward and handed it back to him with a smile. Damn, Tom. I think the TikTok I watched, it was like talking about how Tom was unaffected by the ring, and he's just so chill that the ring doesn't do anything to him or something. And it's like, wow, it's true, according to the words on this page. Frodo looked at it closely and rather suspiciously, like one who has lent a trinket to a juggler. It was the same ring, or looked the same and weighed the same, for that ring had always seemed to Frodo to weigh strangely heavy in the hand, but something prompted him to make sure. Perhaps a trifle annoyed with Tom for seeming to make so light of what even Gandalf thought so perilously important, that even... I want to do that sentence better. He was perhaps a trifle annoyed with Tom for seeming to make so light of what even Gandalf thought so perilously important. He waited for an opportunity. When the talk was going again, and Tom was telling an absurd story about badgers and their queer ways, he then slipped the ring. Then he slipped the ring on. Wow. Mary turned towards him to say something, and gave a start, and checked Mary turned to him to say something, and gave a start, and checked an exclamation. Frodo was delighted, in a way. It was his own ring, all right, for Mary was staring blankly at his chair, and obviously could not see him. He got up and crept away from the fireside towards the door. "Hey there!" cried Tom, glancing toward him with a most seeing look in his shining eye. "Hey, come Frodo there! Where be you a-going? Old Tom Bombadil's not as blind as that yet. Take off your golden ring. Your hand's more fair without it. Come back, leave your game, and sit down beside me. We must talk a while more, and think about the morning. Tom must teach the right road, and keep your feet from wandering." Frodo laughed, trying to feel pleased, and taking off the ring, he came and sat down again. Tom now told them that he reckoned the sun would shine tomorrow, and it would be a glad morning, and setting out would be hopeful. But they would do well to start early, for weather in that country was a thing that even Tom could not be sure of for long. And weather in that country was a thing that even Tom could not be sure of for long. And it would change sometimes quicker than he could change his jacket. "I am no weather master," he said, "nor is it aught that goes on two legs." By his advice, they decided to make nearly due north from his house, over the western and lower slopes of the downs. They might hope in that way to strike the east road in a day's journey, and avoid the Barrows. He told them not to be afraid, but to mind their own business. "Keep to the green grass. Don't you go a-meddling with old stone or cold whites, or prying in the houses, unless you be strong folk with hearts that never falter." He said this more than once, and he advised them to pass the Barrows by on the west side, if they chanced to stray near one. Then he taught them a rhyme to sing if they should by ill luck fall into any danger or difficulty the next day. "Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood, and hill, by reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." When they had sung this all together after him, he clapped them each on the shoulder with a laugh, and taking candles led them back to the bedroom. Boom! And that's chapter 7 completed. Oh, I think my sister's in there. Maybe. Annie, if you're there, hello. Hello. Okay, we are going to move on here. It's only been less than an hour at this point, so we're going to keep going. We're going to read chapter 8. We learned about Tom Bombadil. Quite a curious fellow, was he not? Very interesting. Singing with terrible color combinations. He seemed so wise and unaffected by the ring. Why? Why was he not in the movie? Probably because they had to shorten it so that it would fit in less than like 3 hours or whatever the fuck that movie was. It's probably like 2.5. I don't remember. Okay. All right. We are going to move on to the next chapter here. If anybody needs a break, too bad. Well, do I need a break? No, I don't. I just need some sparkling, you know? Some refreshment. Some mighty refreshment. All right. Alrighty then. Let's do this. Chapter 8. Fog on the Barrow Downs. That night they heard no noises, but either in his dream or out of them, he could not tell which. Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a gray rain curtain, and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, till at last it was rolled back, and a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise. The vision melted into waking, and And there was Tom whistling like a tree full of birds, and the sun was already slanting down the hill and through the open window. Outside everything was green and pale gold. After breakfast, which they again ate alone, they made ready to say farewell, as nearly heavy of heart as was possible on such a morning, cool, bright, and clean under a washed autumn sky of thin blue. The air came fresh from the northwest. Their quiet ponies were almost frisky, sniffing and moving restlessly. Tom came out of the house and waved his hat and danced upon the doorstep, bidding the hobbits to get up and be off and go with good speed. They rode off along a path that wound away from behind the house and went slanting up towards the north end of the hill brow under which it sheltered. They had just dismounted to lead their ponies up the last steep slope when suddenly Frodo stopped. I got a little phlegm in there. Goldberry, he cried, my fair lady, clad in all silver green. We have never said farewell to her, nor seen her since the evening. He was so distressed that he turned back, but at that moment a clearer call came rippling down. There on the hill brow she stood, beckoning to them. Her hair was flying loose, and as it caught the sun it shone and shimmered. A light like the glint of water on dewy glass flashed under from under her feet as she danced. They hastened up the last slope and stood breathless beside her. They bowed, but with a wave of her arm she bade them look around, and they looked out from the hilltop over lands under the and they looked out from the hilltops over lands under the morning. It was now as clear and far seen as it had been veiled and misty when they stood upon the knoll in the forest, which could now be seen rising pale and green out of the darkness in the west. In that direction the land rose in wooded ridges, green, yellow, russet, under the sun, beyond which lay hidden the valley of the Brandywine. To the south, over the line of the Withy Windle, there was a distant glint. There was a distant glint, like pale grass, where the Brandywine River made a great loop in the lowlands and flowed away out of the knowledge of the hobbits. Northward, beyond the dwindling downs, the land ran away in flats and swellings of gray and green and pale earth colors until it faded into a featureless and shadowy distance. Eastern, the Barrow Downs rose, ridge behind ridge, into the morning, and vanished out of eyesight into a guess. It was no more than a guess of blue and a remote white glimmer blending into the hem of the sky, but it spoke to them out of memory and old tales and of the high and distant mountains. They took a deep draught of air and felt that a skip and a few strides would bear them wherever they wished. It seemed faint-hearted to go jogging aside over the crumpled skirts of the downs toward the road, when they should be leaping, as lusty as Tom, over the stepping stones of the hills straight towards the mountains. Goldberry spoke to them and recalled their eyes and thoughts. "Speak now, fair guests," she said, "and hold to your purpose. North with the winds in the left eye, and a blessing on your footsteps. Make haste while the sun shines." And to Frodo she said, "Farewell, elf-friend. It was a merry meeting." But Frodo found no words to answer. He bowed low and mounted his pony, and followed by his friends, jogged slowly down the gentle slope behind the hill. Tom Bombadil's house and the valley and the forest were lost to view, and the air grew warmer between the green walls of hillside and hillside, and the scent of turf rose strong and sweet as they breathed. Turning back, when they reached the bottom of the green hollow, they saw Goldberry. now small and slender, like a sunlit flower against the sky. She was standing still, watching them, and her hands were stretched out towards them. And as they looked, she gave a clear call, and lifting up her hand, she turned and vanished behind the hill. Dang, the haughty nature gal, water nature gal, Goldberry. Their way wound along the floor of the hollow, and round the green feet of a step hill into another deeper and broader valley, and then over the shoulders of further hills, and down their long limbs, and up their smooth sides again, up on the new hilltops, and down, and down into new valleys. There was no tree nor any visible water. It was a country of grass and short springy turf, silent except for the whisper of the air over the edges of the land, and high lonely cries of strange birds. As they journeyed, the sun mounted and grew hot. Each time they climbed a ridge, the breeze seemed to have grown less. When they caught a glimpse of the country westward, the distant forest seemed to be smoldering. I added, it's not smoldering. The distant comes to the country westward. The distant forest seemed to be smoking, as if the fallen rain was steaming up again from leaf and root and mold. A shadow now lay round the edge of sight, a dark haze above which the upper sky was like a blue cap, hot and heavy. About midday, they came to a hill whose top was wide and flattened, like a shallow saucer with a green mounded rim. Inside there was no air stirring, and the skies seemed near their heads. They rode across and looked northwards, and their hearts rose, for it seemed plain that they had come further already than they had expected. Certainly the distances had now all become hazy and deceptive, but there could be no doubt that the downs were coming to an end. A long valley lay below them, winding away northwards, until it came to an opening between two steep shoulders. Beyond there seemed to be no more hills. Due north they faintly glimpsed a long dark line. "That is a line of trees," said Mary, "and that must mark the road. All along it for many leagues east of the bridge there are trees growing. Some say they were planted in the old days." "Splendid," said Frodo. If we make as good going this afternoon as we have done this morning, we shall have left the downs before the sun sets and be jogging on in search of a camping place." But even as he spoke, he turned his glance eastward, and he saw that on that side of the hills were higher and looked down upon them, and all those hills were crowned with green mounds, and on some were standing stones, pointing upwards like jagged teeth out of green gums. That view was somehow disquieting, so they turned from the sight and went down into a hollow circle. In the midst of it there stood a single stone, standing tall under the sun above, and at this hour casting no shadow. It was shapeless and yet significant, like a landmark or a guarding finger, or more like a warning. But they were now hungry, and the sun was still at the fearless noon, so they set their backs against the east side of the stone. It was cool, as if the sun had had no power to warm it, but at the same time this seemed pleasant. There they took food and drink, and made as good a noon meal under the open sky as anyone could wish. For the food came from down under hill. Tom had provided them with plenty for the comfort of the day. Their ponies, unburdened, strayed upon the grass. Whatever, okay. Riding over the hills and eating their fill, the warm sun and the scent of turf, lying a little too long, stretching out their legs and looking at the sky above their noses. These things are, perhaps, enough to explain what happened. However that may be, They woke suddenly and uncomfortably from a sleep they had never meant to take. The standing stone was cold, and it cast a long, pale shadow that stretched eastward over them. The sun, a pale and watery yellow, was gleaming through the mist just above the west wall of the hollow in which they lay, north, south, and east. Beyond was the wall. Beyond the wall was the fog. Beyond the wall, the fog was thick, cold, and white. The air was silent, heavy, and chill. Their ponies were standing crowded together, with their heads down. The hobbits sprang to their feet in alarm, and ran to the western rim. They found that they were upon an island in the fog. Even as they looked out in dismay towards the setting sun, it sank before their eyes into a white sea, and a cold gray shadow sprang up in the east behind. The fog rolled up to the walls and rose above them, and as it mounted, it bent over their heads till it became a roof, and they were shut in a hall of mist, whose central pillar was the standing stone. They felt as if a trap was closing about them, but they did not quite lose heart. They still remembered the hopeful view they had of the line of the road ahead, and they still knew in which direction it lay. In any case, they now had so great a dislike for that hollow place about the stone that no thought of remaining there was in their minds. They packed up as quickly as their chilled fingers would work. Soon they were leading their ponies in a single file over the rim and down the long northward slope of the hill, down into a foggy sea. As they went down, the mist became colder and damper, and their hair hung lank and dripping on their foreheads. When they reached the bottom, it was so chill that they halted and got out cloaks and hoods, which soon became bedewed with gray drops. Then, mounting their ponies, they went slowly on again, feeling their way by the rise and fall of the ground. They were steering, as well as they could guess, by the gate light opening at the far northward end of the valley. At the far northward end of the long valley, which they had seen in the morning. Once they were through the gap, they had only to keep on in anything like a straight line, that they were bound in the end to strike the road. Their thoughts did not go beyond that, except for a vague hope that perhaps away beyond the downs there might be fog. Their going was very slow. To prevent their getting separated and wandering in different directions, they went in file, with Frodo leading. Sam was behind him, and after him came Pippin, and then Merry. The valley seemed to stretch on endlessly. Suddenly Frodo saw a hopeful sign. On either side ahead, a darkness began to loom. A darkness began to loom in the mist, and he guessed they were at last approaching the gap in the hills, the north gate of the Barrow Downs. If they could pass that, they would be free. "Come, follow me," he called over his back over his shoulder, and he hurried forward, but his hope soon changed to bewilderment. That one's a word. But his hope soon changed to bewilderment and alarm. The dark patches grew darker, but they shrank. And suddenly he saw, towering ominous before him and leaning slightly towards one another like the pillars of a headless door, two huge standing stones. He could not remember having seen any sign of these in the valley when he looked out from the hill in the morning. He had passed between them almost before he was aware, and even as he did so, darkness seemed to fall around him. His pony reared and snorted, and he fell off. When he looked back, he found that he was alone. The others had not followed him. "Sam," he called. "Pippin, Merry, come along. Why don't you keep up?" There was no answer. Fear shook him, and he ran back past the stones, shouting wildly, "Sam! Sam! Mary! Pippin!" The pony bolted into the mist and vanished. From some way off, or so it seemed, he thought he heard a cry, "Oi! Frodo! Oi!" It was away eastward, on his left as he stood under the great stones, staring and straining into the gloom. He plunged off in the direction of the call and found himself going steeply uphill. As he struggled on, he called again and kept on calling more and more frantically, but he heard no answer for some time. And then it seemed faint, and far ahead, and high above him. "Frodo, oi!" came the thin voices out of the mist, and then a cry that sounded like "Help, help!" often repeated, ending with a last "Help!" that trailed off into a long wail, suddenly cut short. He stumbled forward with all the speed he could towards the cries, but the light was now gone, and clinging night had closed about him, so that it was impossible to be sure of any direction. He seemed all the time to be climbing up and up. Only the change of the level of the ground at his feet told him when he at last came to the top of a ridge or a hill. He was weary, sweating, and yet chilled. It was wholly dark. Who? Where are you?" he cried out miserably. There was no reply. He stood listening. He was suddenly aware that it was getting very cold, and that up here a wind was beginning to blow, an icy wind. The change was coming in the weather. The mist was flowing past him, now in shreds and tatters. His breath was smoking. The darkness was less near and thick. He looked up and saw with surprise that the faint stars were appearing overhead amid the strands of hurrying cloud and fog. The wind began to hiss over the grass. He imagined suddenly that he caught a muffled cry. Then he made towards it, and even as he went forward, the mist was rolled up and thrust aside, and the starry sky was unveiled. A glance showed him that he was now facing southwards, and was upon a round hilltop, which he must have climbed from the north. Out of the east, the biting wind was blowing. To his right, there loomed against the westward stars a dark black shape. A great barrow stood there. "Where are you?" he cried again, both angry and afraid. "Here," said a deep, "Here. No, I don't know. I don't know what this voice is. "Here," said a voice deep and cold. "Here. Okay, yeah. Here. I'm guessing. I don't even know what this voice is supposed to be. It's supposed to be spooky, I think. "Here," said a voice, deep and cold. It seemed to come out of the ground. "I am waiting for you." "No," said Frodo, but he did not run away. His knees gave, and he fell on the ground. Nothing happened. There was no sound. Trembling, he looked up, in time to see a tall, dark figure, like a shadow against the stars. It leaned over him. He thought there were two eyes, very cold, though lit with a pale light that seemed to come from some remote distance. Then a grip stronger and colder than iron seized him. The icy touch froze his bones, and he remembered no more. How spooky. When he came to himself again, for a moment he could recall nothing except for a sense of dread. Then suddenly he knew that he was imprisoned, caught hopelessly. He was in a barrow. A Barrow-wight had taken him, and he was probably under the dreadful spells of the Barrow-wights, about which whispered tales spoke. The Barrow-wight. He dared not move, but lay as he found himself, flat flat on his back upon a cold stone, with his hands on his breast. But though his fear was so great that it seemed to be part of the very darkness that was round him, he found himself, as he lay thinking about Bilbo Baggins and his stories, of their jogging along together in the lanes of the Shire and talking about roads and adventures. There is a seed of courage hidden, often deeply, it is true, in the heart of the fattest and most timid hobbit, waiting for some final and desperate danger to make it grow. Frodo was neither very fat nor timid. Indeed, though he did not know it, Bilbo and Gandalf had thought him the best hobbit in the Shire. He thought he had come to the end of his adventure, and a terrible end, but the thought hardened him. He found himself stiffening, as if for a final spring. He no longer felt limp like a helpless prey. As he lay there, thinking and getting a hold of himself, he noticed all at once that the darkness was slowly giving way. A pale greenish light was growing around him. It did not at first show him what kind of place he was in. It did not at first show him what kind of place he was in, for the light seemed to be coming out of himself and from the floor beside him, and it had not yet reached the roof or wall. He turned, and there in the cold glow, he saw lying beside him Sam, Pippin, and Merry. They were on their backs, and their faces looked deathly pale, and they were clad in white. About them lay many treasures, of gold maybe, though in that light they looked cold and unlovely. On their heads were circlets, gold chains were about their waists, and on their fingers were many rings. Swords lay by their sides, and shields were at their feet, but across their 3 necks lay one long naked sword. Suddenly, a song began, a cold murmur rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground, out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds. Strings of words would now and again shape themselves, grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved. The cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow. After a while, the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart, he perceived that it had changed into an incantation. Ooh, I gotta sing a song spookily. How do I sing a song spookily? Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind and the stars shall die, and still on gold hill let them lie, till dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. I've given up on the singing, apparently. He heard behind his head a creaking and scraping sound. Raising himself on one arm, he looked and saw now in the pale light they were in a kind of passage, which behind them turned a corner. Round the corner, a long arm was groping, walking on its fingers towards Sam, who was lying nearest, and towards the hilt of the sword that lay upon him. At first Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escaping came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring, whether the Barrow-wight would miss him, and he might find some way out. He thought of himself running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself. Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do. But the courage that had awakened in him was now too strong. He could not leave his friends so easily. He wavered, groping in his pocket, and then fought with himself again, and as he did so, the arm crept nearer. Suddenly, resolve hardened in him, and he seized a short sword that lay beside him, and kneeling, he stooped low over the bodies of his companions. With what strength he had, he hewed at the crawling arm near the wrist, and the hand broke off. But at the same moment, the sword splintered up to the hilt. There was a shriek, and the light vanished. In the dark, there was a snarling noise. Frodo fell forward over Merry, and Merry's face felt cold. All at once, back into his mind, from which it had disappeared with the first coming of the fog, came the memory of the house down under the hill, and of Tom singing. He remembered the rhyme that Tom had taught them. In a small, desperate voice, he began, "Ho, Tom Bombadil." And with that name, his voice seemed to grow strong. It had a full and lively sound, and the dark chamber echoed as if to drum and trumpet. "Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wind, and hill, by reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." There was a sudden, deep silence, which Frodo could hear his heart beating. After a long, slow moment, he heard plain, but far away, as if it was coming down through the ground, through thick walls, an answering voice, singing, "Old Tom Bombadillo is a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom, he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster." There was a loud rumbling sound, as of stones rolling and falling, and suddenly light streamed in, real light, the plain light of day. A low door-like opening appeared at the end of the chamber beyond Frodo's feet, and there was Tom's head, hat, feather, and all, framed against the light of the sun, rising red behind him. The light fell upon the floor and upon the faces of the three hobbits laying beside Frodo. They did not stir, but the sickly hue had left them. They looked now as if they were only very deeply asleep. Tom stooped, removed his hat, came into the dark chamber, singing, "Get out, you old white! Vanish in the sunlight! Shrivel like cold mists, like the winds go wailing! Out into the barren lands, far beyond the mountains! Come never here again! Leave your barrow empty! Last and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand for ever shut, till the world is mended." Whoop. Tom Bombadil, baby. At these words, there was a cry, and part of the inner end of the chamber fell in a crash, and there was a long, trailing shriek, fading away in an unguessable distance, and after that, silence. Come, friend Frodo," said Tom. "Let us get out onto clean grass. You must help me bear them." Together, they carried out Merry, Pippin, and Sam. As Frodo left the barrow for the last time, he thought of what he saw. He thought he saw a severed hand wiggling still, like a wounded spider in a heap of fallen earth. Tom went back in again. There was a sound of much thumping and stamping. When he came out, he was bearing in his arms a great load of treasure, things of gold, silver, copper, and bronze, many beads and chains and jeweled ornaments. He climbed the green barrow and laid them all on top in the sunshine. There he stood, with his hat in his hand and the wind in his hair, and looked down upon the three hobbits. and been laid on their backs against... Let's move this a little. And been laid on their backs upon the grass at the west side of the mound. Raising his right hand, he said in a clear and commanding voice, "Wake now, my merry lads. Wake and hear me calling. Warm now be heart and limb. The cold stone is fallen. The dark door is standing wide. Dead hand is broken. Night under night is flown, and the gate is open." To Frodo's great joy, the hobbits stirred, stretching their arms, rubbed their eyes, and then suddenly sprang up. They looked about in amazement, first at Frodo, and then at Tom, standing large as life on the barrow top above them, and then at themselves in their thin white rags, crowned and belted with pale gold and jingling with trinkets. "What in the name of wonder?" began Mary, feeling the golden circlet that slipped over one eye. Then he stopped, and a shadow came over his face and closed his eyes. "Of course I remember," he said. "The men of Carn Dûm came on us at night, and we were worsted. Ah, the spear in my heart!" He clutched at his breast. "No, no," he said, opening his eyes. "What am I saying? I have been dreaming. Where did you get to, Frodo?" I thought that I was lost," said Frodo, "but I don't want to speak of it. Let us think of what we are to do now. Let us go on." "Dressed up like this, sir," said Sam. "Where are my clothes?" He flung his circlet, belt, and rings into the grass, and looked round helplessly, as if he expected to find his cloak, jacket, and breeches, and other hobbit garments lying somewhere to hand. "You won't find your clothes again," said Tom, bounding down from the mound, and laughing as he danced round them in the sunlight. One would have thought that nothing dangerous or dreadful had happened, and indeed the horror faded out of their hearts as they looked at him, and saw the merry glint in his eyes. "What do you mean? What do you mean?" asked Pippin, looking at him, half puzzled and amused. "Why not?" Tom shook his head, saying, "You found yourselves again, out of the deep water. Clothes are but little loss. If you escape from drowning, be glad, my merry friends, and let the warm sunlight heat and now hard limb. Cast off these cold rags, run naked on the grass, while Tom goes a-hunting." He sprang away down the hill, whistling and calling. Looking down after him, Frodo saw him running away southwards, along the green hollow, between their hills and the next, still whistling and crying, "Hey now, come hoy now, whither do you wander? Up, down, near or far, here, there, or yonder, sharp ears, wise nose, swish tail and bumpkin, white socks, my little lad, old fatty lambkin." So he sang, running fast, tossing up his hat and catching it, until he was hidden by a fold of the ground. But for some time his "Hey now, hoy now" came floating back down the wind, which had shifted round towards the south. The air was growing very warm again. The hobbits ran about for a while on the grass, as he told them. Then they lay basking in the sun, with the delight of those that have been wafted suddenly from bitter winter to a friendly clime, or of people that, after being long ill and bedridden, wake one day to find they are unexpectedly well, and the day is again full of promise. This book's a trip, isn't it? This ain't just no freaking epic of fantasy. This is interesting. This is intriguing. How's my hair looking? Like trash, as always? Ha ha ha. Goofy, old Tom Bombadil-ish. Okay, where are we at? By the time that Tom returned, they were feeling strong and hungry. He reappeared, hat first, over the brow of the hill. Behind him came, in an obedient line, 6 ponies, their own 5, and one more. The last was plainly old fatty lumpkin. He was larger, stronger, fatter, and older than their own ponies. Mary, to whom the others belonged, had not, in fact, given them any such names, but they answered to the new names that Tom Bombadil had given them for the rest of their lives. Tom called them one by one, and they climbed over the brow and stood in a line. Then Tom bowed to the hobbits. "Here are your ponies now," he said. "They've more sense, in some ways, than you wandering hobbits have. More sense in their noses, for they sniff danger ahead, which you walk right into. And if they run to save themselves, then they run right away. You must forgive them all, for though their hearts are faithful, to face fear of Barrow-wights is not what they were made for. See, here they come, bringing all their burdens." Merry, Sam, and Pippin now clothed themselves in spare garments from their packs, and they soon felt too hot, for they were obliged to put on some of their thicker and warmer things that they had brought against the oncoming winter. What is that other old animal, that fatty lumpkin, come from?" asked Frodo. "He's mine," said Tom, "my four-legged friend, though I seldom ride him, and he wanders often far, free upon the hillsides. When your ponies stayed with me, they got to know my lumpkin, and they smelled him in the night and quickly ran to meet him. I thought he'd look for them, and with his words of wisdom take all their fear away. But now, my jolly lumpkin, old Tom's going to ride. Hey, he's coming with you. He's coming with them. He's coming with you, just to set you on the road, so he needs a pony. For you cannot easily talk to hobbits that are riding, when you're on your own legs trying to trot beside them." The hobbits were delighted to hear this, and thanked Tom many times, but he laughed and said that they were so good at losing themselves that he would not feel happy till he had seen them safe over the borders of his land. "I've got things to do," he said, "my making and my singing, my talking and my walking, and my watching of the country. Tom can't be always near to open doors and willow cracks. Tom has to house his mind, and Goldberry is waiting." It was still fairly early by the sun, something between 9 and 10, and the hobbits turned their minds to food. Their last meal had been lunch beside the standing stone the day before. They breakfasted now off the remainder of Tom's provisions, meant for their supper, with additions that Tom had brought with him. It was not a large meal, considering the hobbits and their circumstances, but they felt much better for it. And while they were eating, Tom went up to the mound and looked through the treasures. Most of these he made into a pile that glistered and sparkled in the grass. He bade them to lie there, free to all finders, birds, beasts, elves, or men, and all kindly creatures, for so the spell of the mound should not be broken and scattered, and no wight ever come back to it. He chose for himself from the pile a brooch set with blue stones, many shaded like flax flowers or the wings of blue butterflies. He looked long at it, as if stirred by some memory, shaking his head and saying at last, "Here's a pretty toy for Tom and for his lady. Fair was she who long ago wore this on her shoulder. Goldberry shall wear it now, and we will not forget her." For each of the hobbits he chose a dagger, long, leaf-shaped, and keen, of marvelous workmanship, damask with serpent forms in red and gold. They gleamed as he drew them from their black sheaths, and brought some strange metal, light and strong, and set with many fiery stones. Whether by some virtue in these sheaths, or because of the spell that lay on the mound, the blades seemed untouched by time, unrusted, sharp, glittering in the sun. "Old knives are long enough as swords for hobbit people," he said. "Sharp blades are good to have if Shire folk go walking, east, south, or far away into dark and danger." Then he told them that these blades were forged many long years ago by men of Westerness. They were foes of the Dark Lord, but they were overcome by the evil king of Carn Dûm in the land of Angmar. "Few now remember them," Tom murmured, "yet still some go wandering, son of forgotten kings, walking in loneliness, guarding from evil things that folk are heedless." The hobbits did not understand his words, but as he spoke, they had a vision as if it were a great expanse of years behind them, like a vast shadowy plain over which there strode shapes of men, tall and grim with bright swords, and last came one with a star on his brow. Then the vision faded, and they were back in the sunlit world. It was time to start again. They made ready, packing their bags and lading their ponies. Their new weapons they hung on their leather belts. Their new weapons they hung on their leather belts under their jackets, feeling them very awkward and wondering if they would be of any use. Fighting had not before occurred to any of them as one of the adventures in which their flight would land them. As they last set off, they led their ponies down the hill, and then mounting, they trotted quickly along the valley. They looked back and saw the top of the old mound on the hill, and from it sunlight on the gold went up like yellow flame. Then they turned a shoulder of the downs, and it was hidden from view. Though Frodo looked about him on every side, he saw no sign of the great stone standing like a gate, and before long they came to the northern gap, and rode swiftly through, and the land fell away before them. It was a merry journey with Tom Bombadil, trotting gaily beside them, or before them on Fatty Lumpkin, who could move much faster than his girth promised. Tom saying most of the time, but it was chiefly nonsense, or else perhaps a strange language unknown to the hobbits, an ancient language whose words were mainly those of wonder and delight. Whoop. Oh, okay. They went forward steadily, but they soon saw the road was further away than they had imagined. Even without a fog, their sleep at midday would have prevented them from reaching it until after nightfall on the day before. The dark line they had seen was not a line of trees, but a line of bushes growing on the edge of a deep dike, with a steep wall on the further side. Tom said that it had once been the boundary of a kingdom, but a very long time ago. He seemed to remember something sad about it, and would not say much. They climbed down and out of the dike, and through a gap in the wall, and then Tom turned due north, for they had been bearing somewhat to the west. The land was now open and fairly level, and they quickened their pace, but the sun was already sinking low when at last they saw a line of tall trees ahead, and they knew they had come back to the road after many unexpected adventures. They galloped their ponies over the last furlongs, and halted under the long shadows of the trees. They were on the top of a sloping bank, and the road, now dim as evening drew on, wound away below them. At this point, it ran nearly from southwest to northeast, and on their right it fell quickly down into a wide hollow. It was rutted and bore many signs of the recent heavy rain. There were pools and potholes full of water. They rode down the bank and looked up and down. There was nothing to be seen. "Well, here we are again at last," said Frodo. "I suppose we haven't lost more than 2 days by my shortcut through the forest, but perhaps the delay will prove useful, or it may have put them off our trail." The others looked at him, the shadow of the fear of the Black Riders suddenly over them again. Sorry, that was wrong. The shadow of the fear of the Black Riders came suddenly over them again. Ever since they had entered the forest, they had thought chiefly of getting back to the road. Only now, when it lay beneath their feet, did they remember the danger which pursued them, and was more likely to be lying in wait for them upon the road itself. Itchy. They looked anxiously back towards the setting sun, but the road was brown and empty. "Do you think," asked Pippin hesitatingly, "do you think we may be pursued tonight?" "No, I hope not tonight," answered Tom Bombadil. "Nor perhaps the next day. But do not trust my guess, for I cannot tell for certain. Out east my knowledge fails. Tom is not master of riders from the Black Land far beyond his country." All the same, the hobbits wished he was coming with them. They felt that he would know how to deal with the Black Riders, if anyone did. They would soon now be going forward into lands wholly strange to them, and beyond all but the most vague and distant legends of the... And beyond all but... I'm getting tired. Okay. And beyond all but the most vague and distant legends of the Shire, and in the gathering twilight they longed for home. A deep loneliness and a sense of loss was on them. They stood silent, reluctant to make the final parting, and only slowly became aware that Tom was wishing them farewell, and telling them to have a good heart, and to ride on till dark without halting. "Tom will give you good advice, till this day is over. After that, your own luck must go with you and guide you. 4 miles along the road you'll come upon a village, Bree under Bree Hill, with doors looking westward. There you'll find an old inn that is called the Prancing Pony. Barliman Butterbur is the worthy keeper. There you can stay the night, and afterwards the morning will speed you upon your way. Be bold but wary. Keep your merry hearts, and ride to meet your fortune." No tiredness here, not a single sleepiness. I'm like the hobbits in this book that just fall asleep as they walk all the time. They begged him to come at least as far as the inn and drink once more with them, but he laughed and refused, saying, "Tom's country ends here. He will not pass the borders. Tom has his house to mind, and Goldberry is waiting." "So awake." Then he turned, tossed up his hat, leaped on Lumpkin's back, and rode up over the bank and away singing into the dusk. The hobbits climbed up and watched him until he was out of sight. "I'm so sorry to take leave of Master Bombadil," said Sam. "He's a caution, and no mistake. I reckon we may go. Sorry, I'm kind of trying to get into Sam mode. I've done Sam so many different ways. I was editing. I'm like, man, I can't settle on a damn voice for Sam. I'm just gonna use the movie as a reference. It's like he's got marbles in his mouth. "I'm so sorry to take leave of Master Bombadil," said Sam. "He's a caution, and no mistake. I reckon we may go a good deal further, and see naught better nor queer. But I won't deny I'll be glad to see this prancy pony he speaks of. I hope it'll be like the Green Dragon away back home. What sort of folk are they in Bree?" "There are hobbits in Bree," said Mary, "as well as big folk. I dare say it will be homelike enough. The pony's a good inn by all accounts. My people ride out there now and again." It may be all we could wish, said Frodo, but it is outside the Shire all the same. Don't make yourselves too much at home. Please remember, all of you, that the name of Baggins must not be mentioned. I am Mr. Underhill. If any name must be given. They now mounted their ponies and rode off silently into the evening. Darkness came down quickly. As they plodded slowly downhill and up again, until at last they saw lights twinkling some distance ahead. Before them rose Bree Hill, barring the way, a dark mass against misty stars, and under its western flank nestled a large village. Towards it they now hurried, desiring only to find a fire and a door between them and the night. Finally, we're back in film territory. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Oh, yeah, okay. That is the end of the chapter. Look at that. Wow, they hurried to find a door between them and the night. And now we're at the Prancing Pony, where they will meet Aragorn if the movie's anything to be said about it. Right? I think that's what happens. Probably. All right, well, that's that. Let's see, where are we at? Yeah, I think I did enough. 2 chapters, an hour and 46 minutes. We did lots of reading today. Some interesting voices. Tom Bombadil, quite a character. We got the whole Tom Bombadil experience today. He was very interesting, I must say. It was very spooky, but in a good way, I guess. I don't know. He's a good guy. He's a super chill guy, and he's just like helping. I like the Marbles voice for Sam. Okay, we'll keep the Marbles voice then. Because I feel like it's kind of difficult because it's like, Frodo, Mr. Frodo, sir. Well, I got the Marbles voice, Mr. Frodo. Sounds like the film Sam a little bit, right? Cool. All right. Thanks for hanging out, Breb Derish, for the whole stream. It's mighty wonderful. But yes, we're going to call it. And I will be streaming at this time. Well, not this time. The time I started today, which is 7 Mountain Time. I'm going to be doing that from now on. Because I like the sun being down. Because it fits with the lighting that I set up. That I try to have set up for my vibe. So we're going to be doing that from here on out after daylight savings time. But we're going to go ahead and end the stream. Thank y'all for watching. I just fucked up my setup. Oh, that's. Oops, you didn't see that. You didn't see that. Okay. All right. We're gonna end it. Thank you for watching. Old Tom Bombadil, Bombadillo, or whatever he says. Yeah. Catch y'all later. Farewell.